That's the far.
Okay, so there are some week 3 folders on the T space, but they haven't downloaded yet. So we can work off of the week 2 project. It's just like I like pushed it forward little bits, right? So we could download week 3 and week 4 because it's just it's so slow. Have you noticed the size of that project? 45 gigs or something like that. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I'm going to show you how to like dump all of the things you haven't used, right? Because a lot of the times what you're doing is you're importing a lot of assets, a lot of materials and things that you're not actually ending up using. At some point, in order to optimize your file sizes, you're going to want to just export the things that you want, and I can show you how to do that. Okay. Let's see, where do we begin? Okay. So I'm going to talk mostly about sequencer. Who's interested in animations? Who's going to do animations in their scene? And like movement of characters or, okay, everybody? Okay. All right, so let's see where we got to. So I'm going to open my project.
Oh, that's sick.
You guys, why don't you open the week 2 Villasava project? You guys should have that on your computers already. Well, I think that it hasn't fully copied over
Onto the T
drive, yeah. And so this one's 41%. I have one on the VPN at 51%. It's just taking a really long time. So I think there'll probably be missing parts to that, and I don't want like weird error messages to pop up without knowing, or without us knowing why. So go ahead and open your week 2 project. In fact, maybe I can open that too instead of week 3. So we're working from the same place.
Olivia. It's called Olivia. She's just jumping. Just this thing. Yeah, I don't know.
I just I don't know.
Oh, I have it.
Where is your finger down? Is your finger down?
It's on the C drive, and I saved it directly from this folder.
Oh, is it Unreal? Oh, wait.
I saved it directly to my C drive. I thought it just week.
Oh, wait, I did too.
Yeah.
I did too.
And then
I found it. Thank you.
I opened it up and shit here. Well,
I found it up in the weekend too.
oh, it's because I'm so yeah, I know how to do this. I know. I don't.
All right, this is gonna take a long time, I think. Ah, what a nightmare. Okay. So in the meantime, let's go to your Epic Games launcher. We go to samples. We can go to content examples. Don't click on it. Or maybe you have to click on it. And you get added to your library.
Oh, fast.
And then if you, so click on it, add to your library, and view in launcher.
No.
Lego.
What do you make Lego? think you can open, there's probably more options. Hold on, we said other ways.
I have an Epic Games account. No, it's prompting me to sign out the PlayStation.
And then you should see it here.
Sorry, Jason, we said
Oh.
library with.
So add it to your library, and then it should give you an option to open in launcher, view in launcher.
From that.
From Fab, yeah. And then you should see content examples here. And then you can click on create project.
Oh,
Right, and then let's just pick the version of Unreal that we're using.
one was? Jason, one was Unreal for. Like, when did 5 come out? Because that interface is crazy.
It just looks different. It looks,
updated.
yeah, it looks, yeah. It's not the prettiest, I would say 2020, 2021.
So it doesn't like update like Rhino.
What do you mean?
Okay, like Rhino.
Like Rhino, like from Rhino
Update
7
very
to Rhino 8?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we'll see Unreal Engine 6 anytime soon,
Sure.
but they do constantly go from 5.4, 5.5, 5.6.
Unreal Engine or GTA?
But now you guys understand why it takes so long, right? If you work on this.
We creating a project from the content example.
Yeah. So we want to create, right, put it in a good spot. I don't like this location, I'm just gonna put it,
Refresh. No, it's not a game launcher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Refresh your dot library.
Was your stuff going on?
Yeah, I've been downloading three things. I've been downloading 3 things. I found these sick ass. Oh, for free.
okay, so it's gonna start building a project for you and it's going to then be accessible up here, okay?
Just like, so capable of everything.
Yeah, there's so many layers.
Okay, so you'll wanna wait till this is done. I think it's done.
Library.
We're creating a project, you're creating a project,
9.
and that should pop up here.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, thank God.
You have to wait till it's done.
My laptop would have died, would have like, so just download it for today.
Yeah, well, you've downloaded it, you wanna install it, so it's gotta go through all this process. And then we'll be able to open it.
So we don't have
This is the week 2 Villa Sub Law project from the T space. So that's in the T space. Look up on the screen, go to week 2 and copy this to your, somewhere on your C drive. Were you here on week 2?
No, I was not here
You were
this week, but I was here first, cause I went to.
First week, yeah, so you weren't here last week, so yeah, you'll wanna copy that onto your C drive, not your desktop, your C drive. Okay, so once this is done, it'll give you the create project option again, and if you scroll up, you'll see the content example. Now I have 2, cause I already did it once.
And then we just create.
And then if you double click on it, we're gonna open, you might have your Unreal opening already, just leave that alone. We're opening another instance of Unreal and hopefully we don't crash, but it'll be fine. Right, and if you don't have your week 2 Villa Savoie project, then download it onto your computer, onto your C drive now. All right, because I really want you to follow along. Right, you could look at the sequencer tutorials. They are done on Unreal Engine 4, so it might look a little different. Structurally, it's all the same, but if you follow along today, it's going to help you a lot.
Yeah. Right. At least you're not burning.
Okay, so we should be in an environment like this. It's called example project welcome. Right, you can hit play and you'll be able to kind of navigate similarly. And it's just going to kind of tell you like what kind of stuff is located in here, right?
Oh, good.
Right, like I can stand over this little button and then the gears start turning. I can come here and touch this and the light turns on and off. Right, I can click it on and click it off. Here I can slide something. I can create an interactive slider that changes some sort of thing, right? These are all blueprints, right? That thing that you learned that, or at least most of you watched about, right? So this is, if you recall, you can have as many levels as you want within an Unreal Engine project. And so if we go look in our content, you could see there are a bunch of maps here. Right, and so here are a bunch of different blueprints, examples that have been shown, that have been created to demonstrate different aspects of Unreal Engine, right? So here's like Niagara. This is their particle system, right? So you can double click into that. They're just basic blueprint tutorials, and there are a bunch of them, as you can see. You can click into that. We'll click into one of these in a second. There's like animation and physics, right? We can click into that. So let's double click on the blueprints advanced and take a look at what's in there. Right. And so a lot of blueprints don't work unless you're in the game. Right? Can anyone tell me the difference between a construction script and an event graph from their blueprints tutorial?
The band graph is what we're mostly gonna be using, right?
Maybe.
I know. The band graph is more like gameplay, right?
Yeah.
Instructional script is more like editor.
Yes, that's exactly. So what we do is while we're editing, we're not hitting play while we edit, right? It's sort of like remember the theater analogy, the actors aren't acting, the play isn't going on while we're setting up the play, right? But we may need certain things to run in order for it to test it to work. So what we do is we build things on a construction script so that we can play the blueprint while we're in editor, but we're going to then move that into the event graph so that we can trigger that action to occur based on an event that happens in the game. So events can be like begin play. When I hit the play button, the blueprint just goes, right? Another event might be I get hit by some sort of a projectile or some sort of a physics actor interacts with my physics actor. Then a blueprint of sparks flying off of my chest might appear, right? And so these are blueprints that add functionality, but we need to tell it when to sort of perform that functionality. Okay, and so a lot of these things we need to hit play in order to understand how they work, right? And so here's one that randomly scatters meshes. We can look at that in a second. Automatic wall, automatic ring. Let's see if we can find one. So this one, if I get, no, not this one, maybe the next one. Timeline animation, right? So if I get close, this thing starts tracking me, If I get far away, it like goes back to some sort of a stationary, right? It turns red and it starts following me around. Right? So that's one. So I go over this and this button triggers the gear wheels to move. Right? Oh, here's a door. We'll use this a lot. You get close to the door, it opens, and I go out and it closes. I get near it, it opens the other way, and then it closes again, right? And then if I hit escape, I'm back in my environment, right? So let's take a quick look. I'm gonna fly over to this one. Right? So we can see that it tells us what this is. It's a construction script that's going to repeat a mesh along a spline. So if I grab this endpoint and stretch it out, it keeps adding more and more of that mesh to fill in that space, right? So it's like a shortcut to having to model an entire fence. I can use a spline or a line to populate a certain distance to get filled with picket fences, right? This can then be, that picket fence can be swapped out with something else. It can be swapped out with columns. It could be swapped out with wall panels. It could be swapped out with bricks or floor tile. I mean, I don't recommend doing bricks, but you get the idea. You can repeat an element without having to do it yourself, right? Kind of like you don't want to place every individual tree. You want to either brush it on or procedurally place it. It just saves a lot of time, right? This blueprint is randomly scattered meshes, right? So this is a construction script that is used to commonly position a specified number of meshes in a radius, right? So if we want to see how that works, we just kind of get a sense that there's just some stuff going on here. But if we want to open the blueprint itself, we can highlight the asset and go to click on this edit blueprint. And then we can take a look at what the blueprint looks like, right? So does anyone know AutoCAD? Do you guys even use AutoCAD?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. You guys know what an AutoCAD block is, right? So you could think of a blueprint as like an AutoCAD block, a dynamic block, even still, better still, right? You guys know what a dynamic block is? Like if I move something, it'll orient itself and like it'll get bigger or smaller or change scale, right? It's a block that's a little smarter, right? So a blueprint is kind of like a block, right? So that door is a blueprint, and then I could drop that door anywhere in my scene, and it's going to have that same functionality of if I hover over, get in front of it, it's going to open up and let me through. And if I, get out of its range, it's going to close, right? And I can take that same asset and then repeat it for everywhere I have a door, right? Just in the same exact way, if I'm doing a CAD drawing, I'll have a door block and I can place that same door block everywhere. And if I change that door block, it's going to then change everywhere it needs, everywhere that I've deployed it. Okay, so it works almost identically, right? So if you think about the CAD block, when you edit the CAD block, you're sort of going in a world within a world, right? There's the drawing world, and then there's the block world, right? So like if you double click on the block or whatever it is, it's going to say, do you want to edit the block? And then you say, yes, okay, I do want to edit the block. And then I'm in the block space, right? And the block space has its own origin. And the drawing has its own origin. Okay, so we have to just be a little bit more conscious of what these mean, right? So the origin of a blueprint is the 0, 0 point. It's the position that the blueprint itself is going to be within the space of the world that you place it in. And then the stuff that happens within the blueprint is going to occur relative to that origin. Okay, so we just have to keep track of that, right? If we look on the viewport of the blueprint, we can see what it starts to look like, right? It's got a bunch of these randomly placed assets. So the blueprint is already kind of functioning, right? And this is giving me a base of random meshes. If we go to the event graph, we don't have anything on it yet, right? So this blueprint has been completed on the construction script, which is why we can see it when we're not playing, right? And
In the viewport, can we see those flaps?
the black ones?
Yeah, is
Um,
that part of a script? We're going to make something.
You know, I'm not quite sure.
It's okay. I was just.
Yeah. No, so this blueprint looks a little bit different than I remember it, so maybe they changed it. Um.
Well, and it's truly the map. A map, no shit, advanced. Not to. No shit.
I think what they're doing is they're handling all of these meshes within this variable. Okay.
Yes, if you want.
So, let me see if I can
It's all,
answer that.
it's all.
It looks a little different than I'm used to, but I think it's more important that we understand the script and then we understand what's happening in this scene. Okay, so within the script, it's just a linear sequence of events, right? And so we have a set of values, right? All we're saying is we're going to create a variable, right? A variable is just like a packet, an empty packet, right? We all took algebra, right? You know, y equals mx plus b, right? Like a variable is just a placeholder for something. There are different types of placeholder. There are different types of variables. There are integer variables, there are float variables, there are Boolean variables, right? And these just have more to do with what type of information that variable is expecting to receive. And that type of information corresponds better to certain types of functions within the system, right? So to give an example, if I'm dealing with a number of things, like a number of objects, I wouldn't use a float variable because a float variable gives me decimal places. So I can't really have 1.3 things. I can either have one thing or I can have two things, but I can't really have 1.5 characters or 1.5 boxes, right? It doesn't really work that way. So when it comes to objects and things like that, a more appropriate variable to use would be an integer as opposed to, say, a float, right? You guys know what a float is? Who knows what a float variable is? It's just a number with a decimal point in it, right? And the term float has to do with floating point variable, right? So you have a certain number of numbers and certain number of characters that you can have in a variable. So let's say it's 8, right? A float means I can put that decimal point between any of those 8 numbers to make to make my own number, right? So like if it's 8,746.2735, then my decimal point is in the middle of a range of 8 numbers, right? So if I'm limited to 8 characters, I can only go up to what is it, 10 million? Is that what that? Yeah, 10 million. And I can't have decimal point places after that because that's my limitation of an 8-bit character. Does that make sense? So I can move that decimal point wherever I want to, right? So like if it's 1 point and then I have 7 digits after, I can get very refined, but if my number is big, I'd start to lose that precision, right? But I can move that decimal point wherever I want. An integer is just a whole number, right? Does anyone know what a Boolean is? Yes.
It's a type of data that only stores one of two values.
Yes, it's either on or off. It's yes or no, right? Hot or cold, I/O, right? It's just, that's what a Boolean is, right? And then you could have a vector as a variable, right? Does anyone know what a vector is?
A line with a direction. Like.
Yeah, so in math, we learn it's like a dot with an arrow sticking out of it, right? But a vector it's sort of the same thing. It's 3 values that establishes information, right? So in this case, it's all X, Y, and Z, right? X, Y, and Z, maybe this, let's just leave it there, X, Y, and Z, right? And so these are different types of variables that we can give to blueprints to, to use for a variety of reasons, right? And so here we have a function that's telling me I want two numbers, right? And then it's gonna ask, what number? And then I need to create a variable that's an integer, because it wants an integer, to tell it how many, right? It's really dumb. But we have to do it. It's sort of like, it's like when I talk to my child, I have to explain everything because they just don't have he doesn't have a full grasp of the world. Computers have zero grasp of anything. You have to explain everything to them. So you have to go through all of these steps. So there's a lot that goes into it, but we'll see that what these variables end up doing is it ends up interfacing with us in Blueprint or in Unreal Land, because those are the things we can change and have fun with, right? Hopefully that becomes clear in a second, right? So we have things called variables that, right, in this case, the number of meshes variables is just a pocket for integers that I called number of meshes. The computer doesn't know what number of meshes means. I name it that so that the user knows what I mean by this, right? And so what this is now doing, we can see like these little tooltips explaining what each one does. So we want the computer to generate a random location, right? What kind of a variable would we use for a location? A vector, right? Because we want X, Y, and Z, right? So now I'm going to give it a range of X, Y, and Z values, pick random numbers for each, and just plot things down there, right? And so that would be a vector variable that we would use to do that. We also don't want all of them to face in the same direction. So I'm going to give it a random rotation. What kind of a variable would that be? Also a vector, right? So remember, a transform is location, rotation, and scale. And those are comprised of 3 values each, right? So I could have it rotate in the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis, right? If I always wanted to just spin like this, I would make my x and y 0 and only make z be randomized. Does that make sense? But it's still a vector, right? Because it's rotation. Okay, so, and then it's going to say, all right, after you've done that calculation, right, place that static mesh. And that static mesh could be anything. It could be a character, it could be a model of a computer, it could be a model of an iPad or a glass jar, like it could be anything. It's just a static mesh. And then it's going to take that, what it calculated, based on the number of meshes we told it to do, it's going to place it in those random. Okay. And then the last thing it does is, what is this? Set random mesh from array. So an array is, instead of a single variable, an array is like a bookshelf where I have multiple variables that can go in each shelf, right? So if I want a set of things instead of just one thing, I can create an array and use that as one thing and have the computer say, grab a random thing off the shelf and then put it in a random space, right? So that if I had, say, for example, I wanted to use this blueprint, instead of putting these weird looking boxes, I'll say, okay, I'm going to make 5 models of buildings or skyscrapers. And I wanted to randomly place all of these within a radius of space, right? So that I can create like a fake skyline, right? I could do that by placing each building and shifting it around and doing that. Or I could use a blueprint to place these randomly and say, no, no, oh, that's the one I want, right? So it just gives you a little bit more speed. If you want to, gives you a little bit more speed in creating environments. But the sad part is you have to know how to do that, right? And so but it's very effective when you do, right? The same thing when we're placing trees. I don't want to place random trees. I want to do it procedurally because it's faster and it's probably going to look better than if I did it randomly, or if I did it myself anyway. Okay, so if all of this, like, you could erase it from your mind if you want to at this point, right? If you want to get into it, you can get into it deeper, right? But at the end of the day, what you want is you want to be able to select your variable or select your blueprint in the screen, right? So bear in mind, I could take any of these blueprints and then start co-opting them for myself, right? If I want to use a different static mesh, all I need to do is change that static mesh. If I want to change a few parameters, I should be able to do that, right? And so if I highlight this blueprint and I start looking down here, I can start to see my variables are accessible to me in the editor, right? So I can change my meshes or my mesh count from 20 to, I think I probably just crashed my computers. Type in 30, and then it's gonna change instantly, right? I can change my radius from 170 to say 500. And it's gonna then increase the range at which Unreal is going to place these objects, right? And so now I have something that's adaptable to a variety of situations, right? Had I just placed each of these individually, I can't use that for anything other than what I just did it for, right? And so the idea of using a blueprint or something like that is it just is an additional layer of efficacy, right? But you have to learn how to use it, or better still, you just have to know how to navigate within it. Okay, so the expectation is never going to be, or shouldn't be, although you can if you want to get really good at it, right? It's never that you're going to write this from scratch, although you might be able to do that. It's you just need to learn how to interpret what's going on, right? And a lot of these are commented for you, right? Random rotation, random scale. If I don't want random rotation, I can go in there and edit that. Or I can rotate it. So like you can see here, random rotation is only affecting Z, and my X and Y are 0, right? So I can instead create a random float and apply it to my X, Y, and Z, and it'll rotate in all 3 axes, right? So if I wanted to modify this blueprint for that purpose, then I might do that. Yeah.
So when you say blueprint, you're referring to the mesh with the construction script attached to it.
The blueprint is the script.
It's
The
just-
mesh is just part of it.
Okay, but the blueprint is the mesh plus the construction.
Yeah, if the blueprint has a mesh in it.
Okay,
The blueprint doesn't have to have.
just like to understand if I go to try to download blueprints, it will give me like some base mesh that I can just swap out. With whatever script is
what do you-
attached to it. Like, for example, if the picket fence,
Yeah,
is that
Yeah, so
the
you could change
extendable
that.
picket fence is the blueprint. I
Yeah.
could, if I wanted to make the picket fence like blocks that array instead.
I would
of,
even
like,
call it
a-
the extendable object,
Right,
because the picket fence just happens to be the
that's what
object
they
that you
input
select.
at the end of at
Yeah.
the beginning of the script.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And so these, so that like grasshopper script with the construction.
Yeah.
It's like, at least in these examples, it's just to help you, construct static elements faster.
it doesn't even have to be static, but it's
Right.
just to help you code fast,
Okay,
right? Because all of this translates into C++,
right,
right? So it's like Grasshopper, it's a little more intuitive because it's visual.
right. It's-
Even though it's not that intuitive, it's still hard, right?
It's
Because you have
just
to
like
understand the
before you had
logic.
to actually type out the
Yeah.
code to. like-
But this is even harder still, because I guarantee you probably can do Grasshopper better than you could do Blueprints, because we understand Rhino commands. And we understand a little bit more about like the different things that it's capable of, whereas C++ code is just kind of it's Latin to us all,
Yeah,
right?
that's part.
And yeah,
So like, let's say I want to use a script from that I found on the internet or on top or whatever.
yeah,
And I want to apply to, I don't know, a bunch of apps. And I want them to like do this thing. How do I change the mesh itself? Do I go
so
do it from the script or?
if the blueprint has a slot for a mesh,
Okay.
like a character,
Okay.
right? The cat's supposed to
Yeah,
move.
sure.
Right, so like now we're dealing with a skeletal mesh
Yeah.
and maybe some animation.
Sure.
So that blueprint, if it's say moving people and you wanna swap it out with cats, you would have to kind of find the slot for the people skeletal mesh. And then put the cat skeletal mesh in it, and then swap out the people animation blueprint and put the cat
Right.
animation.
Does this one, like instead of the boxes have spheres, like if, can we change?
You could do
it here?
spheres, yeah.
Okay.
So the way you would do that, and
Random mesh. Beginning of this mesh is too small.
yeah, so in this case, this blueprint used to have the meshes in the blueprint itself, And now I think it's exposed here. So if we scroll down. Right, meshes to spawn,
I see,
right?
okay,
I can increase the number of meshes here,
sure.
right? So right now, this is a bookshelf with 2 spaces, right? If I wanted to increase my array, right, it says array elements.
Yeah.
I just click on the plus, and now I just added another shelf, right?
Sure.
And then I could add another shelf. And you can see what's happening with my blueprint. It's starting to get sparser and sparser, right? And the reason that is it's placing nothingness in the spots that would otherwise be filled with something, right? And then as soon as I fill these shelves with another asset, then it's going to populate those empty spaces with that. And it's randomly selecting from those. You could do it randomly. You could say, do 1 first, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, or then do, or do every even one for every 2 odd ones, right? It's just math that tells the computer how to spread that.
Thank you.
So for the preview, the first level, I think that we opened with all the interactable elements, so those would also be blueprints that have this type of script attached to it that
Yeah.
tells the object how to think
Yeah.
about it. Okay.
Yeah. So then anything that like, so for example, the door that opens and closes, I can then take that blueprint, copy it, and then swap out the door. Instead of the blue cartoony weird door, I can put like the Frank Lloyd Wright gate from the 3rd floor, right? And then just have the same functionality. It's just the way it looks is different because I just changed out the stuff. Okay. All right. So that's the extent that we'll talk about blueprints. Okay, where are we at with the file transfer? Are we done? Mine's done. So I'm gonna go to my C drive.
So
Here.
you can't edit it directly in the construction script.
Well, the construction script is telling the mesh what to do, but it's not determining what the mesh is.
Right, I thought you could input what mesh you wanted to do in the construction script.
You can do it there
Yeah,
on the data.
yeah, that's like, okay, so you have to go outside.
I'm sure.
Search.
Oh.
It feels like it, because this, like, the mesh is like an input value, so I feel like it would make sense to put it in the construction script view.
Here, I think you are doing it like in Grasshopper when you're like,
You like right click the
You
thing,
right-click
and
the
then you
thing.
that, and then you click on what you want it.
right,
to be.
and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what the thing is, the script runs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but like you can do it like on this space, but
Okay.
like for this, you have to exit that. And
but I think you're doing it, you're just determining it like that there or here or somewhere. Yeah, it's also it's right here.
Okay,
Oh.
so I stitched together a cinematic sequence. It's literally 30 seconds long. Right? And so I think it's comprised of 3 shots, three different shots. And then it's describing the narrative that I talked about, right? An affair occurring and then the person comes home, right? And so this is what I rendered out. And then the person's coming home, driving in, and then the person's climbing out and then making a run for it. Right? That's it, done, right? You guys will have however many scenes, no more than 3, I would say, for 30 seconds, even for 60 seconds. Like this is too fast, right? It felt fast. Right, so I could stretch that out even longer, but that's just 3 scenes that would get stretched out longer. And then maybe what I'll do is intersperse some architectural elements in it. And then I start to have aspirations of what I want to do with it, right? Because it's still kind of boring. Right? So for instance, here, as this person, like what I want to do is we can use ray traced reflections in Unreal, right? So I want to use my reflections, like filmmakers love reflections. Like you should really look at the movies that you watch and see how reflections get used, right? So I can reflect the landscape, right? So this is the trees in the foreground with the trees in the background, layering between, the person. You can start to think about these compositional effects that occur as a result of how you move the camera around something to then capture those reflections, right? But we started out with a view from below, right? And all I'm doing is like, I didn't make any of this stuff up. I took my, did I show you the PureRef board already here? Hopefully it's, yeah, it's still there. Right, so I think, yeah, I just took this view. I was like, I like that, it's kind of cool, right? It's got some like wear and like some grunge, right? And so all I did was took that view, right? And I added some grunge and stuff like that, and I can show you that's like uh the polish that will come in the last, right? It's very easy to do, right? And so I added some stains and things like that, some grunge on the glass. It's just an asset I downloaded. I think it's called grungy glass or dirty glass or something, right? Just to give it a little bit more. And I think it's not subtle enough. So I'll make it even more subtle. Subtlety goes a really long way, right? But so instead of a still, I wanted to kind of create some movement, introduce some movement, right? And then that helps me or gives me the opportunity to play around with reflection on the glass and to kind of leverage some of the abilities of rendering these reflections. But I want to add, like, say, more drama to this. So what I might do here is add some clouds moving, things like that. I think I ultimately want to make it rain in the scene, right? Because it's kind of a sad scene. The husband's coming home, like the marriage is clearly over, right? The guy is escaping. He's like a fool. Like it's like tears dropping from the sky, from the heavens, right? And so like,
Yeah, run is very hard. Okay, so gate is so orange. Like about 8 kilometers or 5 times. Right. Well, that's what she knew. That's what she knew.
oh dear, it's gonna work. Brr. Sorry, bear with me. Yeah, at some point within this scene, I'll probably maybe cut to some different views. Right? Again, this is kind of, the purposes of what we're doing is for ArcViz. So I might start to find some shots. Let's see. I wanted some outdoor, right? Because it's raining. I want it to kind of rain in like the rooftop garden, right? I want to kind of replicate like some of these materials and how they've aged, right? There are a lot of these outdoor tables and things like that that I want to capture, right? So like maybe either a view looking in this direction, seeing some of the interiors and the exteriors, or just you know, maybe capturing the ramp or something like that, right? So I just want to like do a few cuts and like look at some of these interior spaces, right? But it's not just about showing the architecture. I might then put like, you know, wine glasses, like an eaten dinner, right? Like, you know, something like fun happened in the house, like that we're seeing the results of, right? So again, just tying all of that back into the narrative. And the way I'm gonna try to keep track of all of this is using the Moreau board, right? Right. So I'm like, you know, this was like from my PureRef board, like just kind of my wish list of, you know, what are the shots that I'm interested in and trying to do. I want to capture some reflection. So like I grabbed that image just to see what the reality looks like so that, you know, what I'm doing kind of matches that a little bit, right? Placing some cameras initially and just looking at like framing my view, composing my view a little bit, right? Sketching over, you know, some preliminary screenshots to like show what I'm interested in. Here I'm noting reflection, but I don't know that that's working, but I definitely wanted the ashtray with the smoke and things, right? And so I downloaded some assets, and then all I did was follow a tutorial. I literally typed UE5 cigarette smoke Niagara, or just even cigarette smoke. And then I found a tutorial that I just followed step by step to make that smoke, right? So it's not even like, it requires zero expertise, just patience to follow along, right? And then, you know, with a car driving scene, I wanted the car to bump up and down because initially it was just kind of floating on a perfectly flat surface, which felt a little odd. And so in this scene, the car, when it moves, it's kind of like bumping vertically as well, right? So like I'm using the vehicle physics and stuff like that, taking advantage of some of those things just to make it more realistic, right? Um, Again, that's a last 2 weeks kind of thing, right? You want to prioritize what's important for your scene and just tackle the most important elements first. And like the icing, like this is not even icing, it's a sprinkle maybe on the cake, right? But if it's something that's going to bother you, then you might want to fix it, right? Or something that stands out, you might want to fix it because you want to keep your audience within the scene, right? And so that's what this says, like bumps take advantage of physics, reflections, like I want it to rain so I can have like a nice reflective sheen on the ground, on my landscape. So then the car is reflected, the house is reflected, right? Again, filmmakers love, I'm not a filmmaker. We, you know, reflections are cool, right? So let's do that. So here's my sketch that shows that. So the car is actually coming home and it's raining. I'll have little drops of water, maybe trying to, or try to get some drops of water to splash off of the car and off of the landscape surface, and have like a bit of water underneath the gravel so that we see kind of this blurry partial reflection coming off of it, right? And then here's my escape scene, right? So I want the window to open. I'm gonna have clothes getting flung out of the window, and then the person climbs down and makes their escape, right? I haven't done the clothes part yet. I don't know if I will. Maybe it's kind of, I don't know. If I have time.
Person throws the clothes out.
After, oh, that's a good idea because my timing was off. So thank you for that suggestion, right? And then when the car turns the corner, the guy then like is there looking. So he almost got caught basically, right? And so the timing is off on my scene, right? So the car is gone already and the guy is nowhere near the part where he's looking back, right? So I want like this to have just happened when he's here. Right? So then it's just like, oh my God, like he just escaped, right? Like, so how do you build tension within the scene, right? Like within the objects, right? They could be static objects, they could be dynamic, but just trying to create some sort of visual interest or connect to your audience in a way to make things more interesting, like to pull them in, right? And so, and that's all sort of your own creative input. And then he runs away from the direction that, right? Then I had that other version where he ran across the field. I just decided I don't want to deal with that side of the house. So I just kept it on this side of the house, right? So you can make efficiency choices there as well, right? But if you recall my windows from the old version, so if I go back, I had some audio in this one. So maybe I'll show. Right, this was my initial take, right? The car is just going smooth, right? So that always felt kind of weird to me, right? The leaves followed, I lost that, so I got to bring that back, right? But these windows were the windows that came with my original model, and they looked really shitty, right? And I wasn't really able to open them the way I wanted to, right? So then what I ended up doing is going into right? I brought that model into Rhino, right? And I'm only gonna model the things that I want to adjust. I'm not gonna change anything about the house, right? I'm not gonna re-import the house even. I'm only gonna fix the things that are bothering me or that need to be fixed in order to make my narrative work, right? And so all I did was I modeled these windows, right? I modeled this side too, but I still don't know that I'm going to use it, right? So I just modeled these windows based on, right, an image of Villa Salvador.
And then does that update the asset in Unreal, or do you have to?
So you could do it a couple of ways, right? So what I did here was I just took everything that's purple and blue and I exported it as an FBX, right? I imported this model directly in to Rhino. So the 0, 0 is the same as what's in Unreal Engine, right? I exported only the windows, and in Unreal Engine, I got rid of my windows. So let's go to.
That.
So remember our.
Or you can change your model to Unreal.
Yeah. Well, I can delete parts of my model in Unreal, right?
Oh, because your model has.
Is this right? So this is already post deletion, but you see this side doesn't have windows because everything was like grouped into one thing. In fact, if I go into my if I go into architecture of I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it easily, but one of these meshes is all 4 sides of window. So, in this case, I had to delete all of them. I could select the individual ones and delete them, but I didn't like any of the windows anyway, so I just got rid of them. And then I just didn't replace it. Yeah.
So, I guess to make sure the windows are in the exact same place.
Yeah.
When you originally import the first like FBX model, like you should build the landscape around it then. Because if you edit the same Rhino file, you can just like,
You can always,
it'll like snap in the same place when you.
so as long as you maintain its origin.
Yeah.
And that's the same origin as what's in Unreal, then as long as you match the X, Y, and Z in your rotation, the transform of that asset, it should snap right back to where you.
Right.
Right. So for example, I'll show you,
But that means like, if I were to build like the landscape manually, I should do that, like I shouldn't move the object around on the landscape. I should move the landscape under the object.
if you need to move your landscape, yeah, unless you keep track of where. So,
Okay.
so if I moved Villa Savoie, right? I just need to know what this is. And when I import my windows, I just copy and paste that onto my windows and it'll be the same. So if I, even if I move the house, its relative location is the same, matches, right? So what I did was, in this case, I just imported the windows separately. And these are all like individual static meshes, right? So if I grab this and dragged it in, right? It's sort of in this random location, right? So now what I can do is I'll group that. Right click and group. So they're all one thing now. I can highlight my, just any model, like all of these models has the same location, right? Because it's referring to the same origin. So then I could right click on location and copy that, highlight my window, right click and paste it, and then it'll just put it in that exact same spot, right? So as long as I'm not moving the Rhino model, like I'm not moving, as long as I'm not moving the Villa Sava model in Rhino to a different location, right?
Oh, okay, yes, because that would change the reference.
It will
order
change the
when
reference
you-
order.
When you import it.
Yeah, exactly.
And what makes these operable as opposed to the previous ones?
So these are operable because
That transform the sequence.
well, because they're all in little pieces. What did I just do? You're saying ungroup them first?
Oh, I was sorry.
Yeah, I think it just didn't delete the last one. Right? So these are all individual pieces. And so now I can grab
Sure.
an individual asset and then move that. Whereas the old one was just one mesh, right? So I could have taken the old mesh and just put like a rectangle or a frame and done the same thing. And you probably wouldn't have noticed, right? But like I thought, yeah, why not make the real windows? And this way I could control each reflection from the window separately. So then I could take each panel and just adjust them slightly. And so the reflection isn't like this perfect pristine thing, but they're all kind of, there's a little bit of wonkiness to it that adds to the realism.
Sorry, when you say adjust, you mean you're rotating the windows
Yeah.
as static meshes, so
Yeah.
that when you play, they'll just be sort of stuck in that position.
Yeah, so if I hit G for game mode, so if sometimes it's hard to, you can't highlight translucent objects. So if you're dealing with glass, if you go here and allow translucent selection, you'll want to check this box. The hotkey is T for translucent, right? So if this is off, I can't grab my glass. It's going to go behind, right? So if I hit T, then I can grab my glass, but I don't know if these are even noticeably changed. You know, they all say 000, so maybe I changed it in Rhino. I think I rotated it a little bit, not in. Right? So the other way is if you want to start in Rhino and start augmenting the model and then import that into Unreal Engine, the way to do that is through what's called a datasmith import, right? So I can highlight my model and go to File, Export Selected. And then I'm going to export this as an Unreal Datasmith file. Right? You guys should all see this. Are you in Rhino? Can you just open Rhino, one person at least, and tell me if you see this? If you don't see this as an option, you may have to install the Datasmith Exporter plugin. So if we go and type Datasmith export for Rhino, right? So we go to the Datasmith export plugins page, and we can import or download the exporter plugin for whatever 3D model software you're using, right? So out of all of these platforms, you can export to Unreal using Datasmith. Right, so here we have Rhino, supports Rhino 6 to 8 for Unreal Engine, so we want to select the version that we want, right? We only see 5.6, so we want to look at view archived versions and select 5.4. Download this and install it, and then it should be ready to go. You should be able to export from Rhino.
Cause I can't see it.
Hmm?
I can't see it in Rhino.
Yeah,
I see.
you see it? Yeah, maybe not all of you have it. So if you don't have it, go in your Chrome search, just type Datasmith export plugin and go to the Unreal page. That pops up, not the Twinmotion page, but the Unreal page, and you'll see something like this. So if you're using 3ds Max, I can export a downloaded exporter for 3ds Max. If I'm using Revit, I've got that. If I'm using Form Z, who uses Form Z? If I'm using any of these platforms, right? But most of you guys are going to be dealing with Rhino, right? So now back in Rhino, right? I'm going to export this as an Unreal Datasmith asset. I'm going to want to control where that's located as well. Oh my God, this is like getting crazy. There's so many things to keep track of. It's really, it's crazy. There's a lot, right? So, but we do need to keep track of it, right? And so make sure you have it in a good spot, right? I'm putting it all over in crazy places, but whatever. I'm going to create a Datasmith folder. Savoir. And then I'm going to call this Savoir week 2 or week 3. And then hit save. Right? So there is a way of syncing your Unreal project to Datasmith. So if you go back and update your Rhino model in Unreal, you can sync it very quickly, right? I sometimes use this. A lot of the times I'll just re-export and re-import. Because then I know exactly when it's, well, you're syncing it very deliberately too. So you guys can decide what you want to do. But in the Unreal side, what we need to do is go to Edit, Plugins, Datasmith, and you need to make sure this box is checked. It might be checked by default, but you need the Datasmith importer. Right? Yeah, just the Datasmith importer. Yes. And then if you go now to add,
No, when you're trying.
yeah. So if you click on this down, drop down, why is it here? All right, you have to go to this drop down arrow. Yeah. And you'll see Datasmith. You could do a file import, which just imports the file. Or you could do a direct link import, which will link your Rhino file. And so you'll have to export to update the link in Rhino and then update it in Unreal. It's a little bit complicated, so that's why I've just kind of done file import, right? Because we shouldn't be modeling a lot in this class, I'm just going to do a file. Okay, so here's my file import. It's going to ask me where it is. So C 1019C is Datasmith Savoir. So it's looking for this file, right? All of the assets associated with that are there. Don't touch that. Just highlight this. When you move your Datasmith, you got to move all of it, right? But it wants this, and I hit open. It's going to ask me, where do I want it? Okay, so again, we have to be very right? Just so I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to create a new folder here. I'm going to call it Datasmith. Right? And then do the same thing again. File import. Savoir week 3. This is what I exported from Rhino. Hit import. And now I'm going to put it in that folder just so it's clean. right? So everything in that folder is gonna be associated with Datasmith. I want geometry, sure, materials and textures. If you have lights in the scene, you can import them. Cameras in the scene, you can import them, and animations. I usually do all of that in. And then I'll hit import. Okay, so it not only imports the scene, but it'll also bring the model into your space. So this is located in the same relative position as your Rhino. Okay, but for me, it's off in space, right?
And this brings all the textures and everything that we previously did. Right? That's what Jada Smith exploded.
It'll bring the textures if you have them in Rhino.
Because I tried to say from Rhino, just as the file.
Yeah, it
The
didn't bring
model
any.
was all messed up.
Yeah, so if you do a Datasmith export, yes, it will preserve, it won't remember V-Ray materials. Or it won't handle V-Ray materials. At least it historically has not.
So we're looking at landscape materials.
I don't know.
Well, but all your materials are native in,
It should work, yeah. I mean, as long as it's, it should reconnect the diffuse slot to the diffuse slot. If it comes in white, it doesn't mean it's not there. It
You
just
have
means
to
you have to
reapply.
reconnect everything.
Okay.
It's kind of a pain in the ass, but such is life. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing.
When you bring that new model, does it mean you have to delete the whole?
No, I mean, I have both. I have two subwasms in
Oh,
right?
So just to clarify, this like Datasmith plugin, it allows you to like link the Rhino file with the Unreal one.
Yeah.
So it's actually referencing the Rhino file.
It can, if I did the direct live link. So if I use this option,
Like the InDesign.
Yeah,
right?
oh.
Direct link import. So in Rhino, what I would do is, okay, I've made some changes. I want to synchronize now. I can click on the synchronize button. And then in theory, if my Unreal Engine is open and it's linked, it should update it. It's a little bit finicky. So I'll warn you of that. But if you're interested in using that, there are tons of tutorials that will show you exactly.
This is like just in case, if I move the file around, it's not gonna, so it'll snap automatically.
You could still move your model. Unreal.
In Unreal.
Yeah.
Right, but like if I change the like color of the windows, for example, in Rhino, or I deleted the windows in Rhino.
Yeah.
It would update on.
Yes, it'll be
on the-
deleted in.
In Unreal, but if I if I move the Unreal model around, and then I re-add the windows.
Yeah.
To Rhino.
Yeah, it'll
re-add
put it in the
windows
right.
In the right
space.
spot,
Yeah,
right?
yes. If you delete something in Unreal that exists in Rhino and you re-import, it won't reappear in Unreal. Unless you tell it.
Okay.
There's a checkbox that says import deleted assets or re-import deleted assets.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't think I get the Datasmith thing. Is when you import the file onto Unreal, is it like a static mesh or?
Yes, it's a static mesh.
So when you import it, you can add the collision and put this,
You could, yes.
but
I always control collisions myself.
okay.
I wouldn't import it with collisions because what it's gonna do is it's gonna shrink wrap your model with a collider, so you can't go inside of it. And everything's gonna have a collision. Everything inside of it's gonna be shrink.
Then you can add collisions to specific elements.
Yeah.
that you care about.
Exactly. So if I want a wall, what I'll even do is take an Unreal Engine cube and put it there and just make the cube static mesh disappear, but its collisions and just use that. Right? You want your collisions to be simpler than your models. Otherwise, you're just doubling up to your triangles.
If I had applied like a construction script to like a door, for example, that I modeled in Rhino, that was in my building, and then I changed the dimensions of the door in Rhino. Would
You have to update your script.
like, as in like the script would totally be deleted, or it would just hinge wrong
Well,
because the referencing.
So if you're doing that, you're bringing everything in via Datasmith.
Yeah.
But I'm taking that door and I'm turning that door into.
And that.
So then I'm
one
gonna delete that
instance-
in Rhino,
Okay,
because
Yeah.
now I have an Unreal door that has that functionality. So I don't want the Rhino to have that door, because then I'm gonna have two doors in that same spot.
So you're saying it's like I import the building with a door in it that I modeled in Rhino.
Yeah.
And then in Unreal, I click on the door and I make it part of a blueprint.
Or I would make a blueprint and use that static mesh in my blueprint.
Right,
And then I would put that blueprint in place of that door, but I'm deleting that door.
okay.
I don't want Rhino to handle that door anymore.
Okay, so if I wanted to change the dimension of door after the blueprint was applied, I would have to do it in Unreal.
Yes,
Okay,
you'd have to do it twice, basically, yeah. Or you could do it in Rhino, re-import it with the door, then replace the asset, swap the asset,
right.
but you have to go through that extra stuff.
So it's not smart enough to like
No,
understand that like
computers are dumb,
the-
they're dumb.
the like element I'm referencing changed sizes and
They
it would
have
do the
to,
same thing
yeah,
with it, like, okay.
Unfortunately, even AI won't be able to do that. Okay, cool. All right, so that's Datasmith. That's like the workflow from Rhino into Unreal. Okay, so like I said, in this case, I just started with the mesh directly imported into Rhino or into Unreal, and then I brought my mesh also into Rhino with the same origin so that I can make modifications, right? If I wanted to, I could take this, right? If I wanted to go into Unreal, I can right click here and paste those same, right? So I can take my Villa Savoie, I should be able to paste the house back. And now they're overlapping one another. Right? And you can see that flickering is called Z fighting. It's when two planes are coincident, the rendering engine doesn't know which one to use, so it starts freaking out. Right? But you can see they're directly on top of one another, right? So I'm just going to delete that.
That's better.
Why is it reflective? That's kind of crazy.
Chromed it out.
Civil expense. So very, that's fine.
Why is that? It must have done something with the material. I'm gonna,
But the windows are light sources.
huh?
The windows look like light sources.
The windows look like light sources. Oh, that box. So that's a reflection asset. So let me just delete this. Can I just undo the import? Edit. Can't undo. Okay, yeah. So let's just see if I can delete this. I don't want this. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm over here. You're talking about, oi, slow down. So because I want to use reflections, right? I'm hitting G for game mode. What I'm doing is I'm using what's called a planar reflection actor, and I'm just aligning that to my reflective surface. So that's going to help calculate for that spot, for anything within that box, the reflection on any reflective surfaces within the box, right?
Without it, it still does it just.
Without it, it does what's called screen space reflections, and the reflections won't. Right? And so what we need is go to our what we need to do is go to our volumes here. In fact, let's just go and type right? Planar reflection, right? And then what we also need to do is go into our project settings and support global clip plane for planar reflections, right? If you add that volume, it's going to tell you to do this. Okay. Don't do it yet, right? Just know what's reflective. You can if you want to, but just know what's reflective. We're going to go through ray tracing and doing all the kind of checkboxes to set that up for the bells and whistles part of part of it. But I don't want to turn it on now because it's going to slow things down for you. And it's, yeah, save that for later because it's just going to make things so much faster without it. Right? So let's talk about the cinematic. Right? I have 2 instances of Unreal open, so I'm going to close this one. If you guys have 2 instances, please close it out. And now we're going to talk about setting up our Rhino scene, or not our cinematic scenes, such that I can take out all of my shots in one sequence. Okay. And this is basically covering what was covered in the sequencer tutorial, right? So you should all hopefully have a level sequence actor in your scene, right? It looks like this. Right, like a little clacker. If you don't have it, I always do that. Right? You can click on this clacker icon and grab it and drag it into your scene. Right? And then I'm going to create in a folder. In fact, you may have already done this from previous tutorials. I'm going to have a master sequence, and that's sort of like the father of all of my sequences, or the mother, sorry. Exactly. The parent of all sequences, right? That controls, like that kind of takes all those sequences in it and tells it, okay, play this one now, okay, play that one later, I'll do this now, do that later, right? But I can control multiple sequences within one sequence, right? And so that's what my master sequence is. And I'm going to drag that onto this slot. Right? If you don't have one, just right click, cinematics. I'm going to create a new level sequence. I can call this LS for level sequence underscore. You can name it whatever you want. I'll call it parent this time, just to differentiate it. So now I can drag that into my level sequence, right? Call it whatever you want to, doesn't matter. And then I'm going to hit open level sequence. I'm going to dock this over here, right? And I have a completely blank sequence. Right? But you can see within my cinematics folder, I have a bunch of sequences that I created, right? And I've kind of named them well. So let's see. So this one, if I double click on that, right? I got to highlight my camera cut. So I click on this. Oh, I need to create my 2-pane layout. So I have my cinematic viewport, right? And so now my left screen is showing me what's in the sequence, right? So now here's my shot where I just did that camera move and the reflection, right?
So you just drag it from the content drawer.
Yes, I could do, well, I wouldn't do it exactly that way. I also have my car driving. Here, let's start with this one. Let's show this one. So this one, again, I have to highlight this again. This is the one that just has my character running away, right? There's not even the car associated with this. And then I've got some. This is my sequence just to open the window. right? So I can move that in the main or master sequence so that I could time it. So if I wanted the clothes to come out first, I'll have the window open first and then the clothes will fly out. But if I want to throw the clothes out after he climbs down, which is a great idea, I'm totally gonna do it. I'll have the window open right before he climbs out and then the clothes will get thrown, right? So I'm doing it in a separate sequence so that I can control its timing later. I could do it all in one sequence if I wanted to, but then it's harder to edit and move things around in chunks.
Let's say you're doing the window opening and then clothes are coming out like midway.
Yeah.
Can you overlap sequences?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. So all that the sequence is capturing is not what you're viewing through the camera. It's just whatever is located here, right? So all I have here is the window object, which is the frame in the glass, and a transform. And all I'm doing is I'm moving it in Y such that it looks like it's opening and affecting the speed so that it's like kind of sliding in a convincing way. Right? I could use this camera rig rail for this too if I wanted to, but there's really no need because it's only moving in one direction. Right? And so all I'm doing is I'm keying the Y position of this window such that it just opens and that's it. Right? And then I think my car might be in this one. Right? There isn't even a camera. Oh, I do actually have a camera here, right? But I think the car is in this one. So now if I hit play. No. No, it's just the camera. It's just that view.
So the sequence itself is just, for example, the window opens, like from what angle, that's determined by where you place a cam. Like the camera is totally separate from the
And
sequence.
that's,
Yeah.
and that's the power of this over rendering, is like a rendering is like a painting or something.
It's like restaurant.
It's like from one, right, yeah, restaurants, from one angle, where this is like.
Whereas
this
this is, if I
I'm
was
moving
behind
off.
the building as the window is, I would be able to see that happening as I.
Right.
Yeah.
would
So
change.
if I place the camera from the inside when the window will open the sequence played, then I would just look through that other
Yeah.
camera but see the windows.
Yeah.
And in all of these sequences, you have LS main as like.
That's just where I put all of them together and I'm just composing in that sequence.
So you could create like a little asset library of sequences that you like fit together in different ways.
Yeah.
To like, so it's like I have a window opening one, I could have a like person walking one, and they could be. I could see
Yeah,
the window
and you
opening
could
them walking at the
position
same
them,
time.
yeah, exactly,
And from different views.
Yeah.
exactly,
It's the same.
right? So I might have a sequence just for the camera position without anything even moving, but I'm probably gonna move the camera. Right, because if it's just by itself, like some of the scenes, the camera is just positioned by itself, or the camera is positioned and not moving. I'll even just introduce a slight movement to it, just to add a little something. You won't even notice it, but it does have an effect, right? And so just having a little, and yeah, like there's also camera shake you could introduce. So if you're following a character or something like that, just to avoid that mechanical movement, the camera could just kind of just slowly do this. And it feels a little bit more real.
Would you show that us today or later when we're?
I'll show that, that's icing for later.
So any.
You could look it up too, it's very.
Any element moving that you, any change in sort of position of any element. Or any transformation of any element has to be a sequence. Sort of like. that,
Yeah,
and
if
just
you
like-
wanna use sequencer to capture it, that's where you would make it. You can make it move using blueprints. If you wanted to, but
would
it's
you
harder
have
to control.
Make that as, or could you put the blueprint directly?
The blueprint will, you can have it trigger, you could trigger it to play. So I could put the blueprint, for instance, of the door opening. And if I have my character walk and collide with that thing that opens the door.
I see,
Because the blueprint's like, oh,
and you're not
oh,
controlling
okay,
the
like,
character's
it's-
life. It's
yeah,
just, you
yeah.
just made it walk.
you
into
just
the
made it
door.
walk and the character, as long as it has a collision and
Yeah.
goes through that box, it'll open the door.
I see.
just because that's how the blueprint was written and that's how it was, right? So you can certainly have a blueprint in the sequence where the blueprint is not even in the sequence itself, but is interacting with an element within it.
So blueprint a camera so that it always locks onto one object.
You don't need to do that in blueprint, you could definitely do that over. So so if you highlight your camera. So if you highlight any camera, in fact, it's like the first thing, look at tracking settings.
Oh,
So enable look at tracking, and then you use this eyedropper and you could pick like a character or an object, and it'll always look at that object, even if you, right?
so I think that's.
So let's go ahead and add a camera here. So create camera here, cine camera actor, right? So now if I zoom away, here's my camera, right? So now if I enable look at tracking, and I click on this little eyedropper, I'm gonna eyedrop the house. And so now if I move the camera, it's actually gonna rotate itself to track that on. Right, so it's basically overriding the rotation to always look at the thing that you.
So it's
highlighted.
like a blueprint, but it's baked into the.
It's baked into the camera.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it's such a common function.
yes, exactly. But it is in itself a blueprint.
C++.
Yeah.
So how did you just right click the viewport to add it?
I just clicked on this. And basically, if you click on this drop down arrow, wherever you are, you can create a camera. So it says create camera here.
See.
And then I would always use a cine camera actor because that has more control. But I think the basic camera actor will also help look at functionality. Right, so you can track a character moving, or you can track an object while the camera is moving. And then you can combine that with your rig rail, so the rig rail might be moving and the camera will be following the whatever the look at target is. Okay, so I've got all of these sequences that I've set up, right? And I might, like I said, I want to do some shots of the interior, right? So let's. Where am I? So I want to do some shots. I could do like a shot here or something like that. Right? The model needs more work, right? But it doesn't matter. Right now we're just blocking things out, we're just composing it, right? And so, but once I place the camera and I like where it's at, I'm only gonna work where the camera is actually visible. Right? I'm not gonna update parts of the model that I'm never gonna use. It's like pointless. Right? We do have this tendency to like, oh, I'm gonna make it all, so it's all there for me if I want, right? Don't waste your time. Right? Only focus on the thing that's most important, right? And the way you figure that out is by placing these cameras first, right? So a big part of this exercise of doing our entire video sequence is now you're limiting yourself to updating only that which is visible within that sequence, okay? So keep that in mind. You can always change it, but you at least have a starting point and a set of objectives. So let's create a camera here. Cine camera actor, right? I always like to use DSLR. I hate wide angles, but sometimes it's okay. Maybe we'll do 35, right? And so what the other thing I could do is once I've started changing some of these camera settings, I can go in here and pilot that camera. So I have camera 7. So now I'm in camera 7 and I can just kind of rotate. And the same way I move around and navigate in Unreal, right? I can start to change things. So maybe it's a view from the inside looking out, right? It's always important to think about foreground, midground, and background too. And so sometimes you'll want things that are framing the foreground, right? So like in this view on the left, that camera on the left, I wanted the little blurry tree branches on the left. And maybe I'll even add one on the right to just kind of like frame that view and sort of position your audience in a location, right? I'm kind of like hidden away or like kind of, it's like a secret vantage point or something like that, so you can play with that, right? And then once you've positioned your camera, you can just click on this little eject button.
Can you lock the camera so that when you go in, you don't move it actually? I mean, you can also just not go in.
If you go into it, I mean, if you're going into it to move it.
Okay.
So that's one thing. So sometimes you'll want to go into it just to see what's there. You just have to not move.
Sure.
We can also lock it. Oh, my.
Lock it here?
Yeah.
How?
Just a second. Wait.
Yeah, there might be a way of locking it, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure myself.
Not good.
Right? So like maybe I like that shot. So now I have Cine Camera 7. I'm gonna move it up and place it in my cinematics folder. Right? Oh dear.
I think I found it.
So it's right like on the outliner, then transform. I have a larger menu. Right,
Right click on this.
yeah. See here, it gives me transform, and then there's lock after movement.
Well, that's still gonna allow you to move because it'll lock it after movement, maybe.
You lock that.
Yeah. Yeah. Sadly, our video cards are maybe not as great as they're cracked up to be. Right now, it also doesn't help that I have 3 camera views, so that helped it. But now I have another camera position that I'm interested in. So I'm gonna right click here. I'm gonna create another cinematic level sequence. And I'm gonna call this LS underscore like garden shot or something, right? And so I might double click on that. In order to add that camera, well, first remember to change our frame rates to film. I'm gonna click add. I'm gonna add a camera cut track to this. And then I can click on this little plus button and I can select my camera 7, which I just added. And if I highlight that, now I can see this view, right? And I have 120 frames. I think that's 5 seconds. And so now I have at least that camera view available to me, right? And I could animate that camera or start animating things within that scene if I wanted to later on, but I just want to at least frame that view, right? So now I want to open that, what was it, the parent sequence, right? And again, we created it from scratch. We have a bunch of sequences. So all we need to do in here now is to add some shot tracks or add a shot track layer, right? So my first shot might be, right? So I should have named these things better, right? But I didn't. So I want to highlight this. So here's my shot. How long is 30 seconds at 24 frames per second? I think it's 720. Right? So I can drag this all the way out. Oh, wait. But first I need to change my frame rate. 720, right?
Yep.
So let's just drag this out roughly around there. Right? And I could start shortening this or lengthening it as I want, right? I can move this. I can right click. Edit. I could trim this. I could split this into 2 and I could drag this and show that somewhere else. Right? And so here I have the greatest amount of editing control, right? Once I've selected the shot, I can edit freely in my parent sequence, right?
Nothing between shots, it's just black screen.
Yeah, I think it just shows the main, whatever the main. right? So you'll want to position your shots in such a way that you're not going to get that. Right? So I want to add another camera or another shot. So I'm going to go, let's see, where is my, camera 5 is, no, camera 0 was my main shot, right? So I want to position this and it should snap. It should snap to the end, right? I could put it up here, but it's just easier to see when I make a differentiation. And then it's, right, it goes from this shot to this shot.
If you wanna give it that like couple of frames, black screen as a
I think there is an easy way of,
like diagnosis.
you can, but so these are, I think they're referred to as fades. And there should be ways of doing it directly here, but I'm not sure. UE5 fade.
There may be times when you want.
Maybe that one might have it.
Sure.
I would just go
There
in.
may be times when you want to fade in or out of your level sequence. You can accomplish this fade track, and you can animate between 0 to 1, 0 being
add a fade.
no fade, 1 fully faded. So right at the beginning of my sequence with the auto key on, I'm going to set.
So yes, I mean, it's very common, so there's definitely gonna be that. But I would put that, I would probably put it in the shot itself. But if you're cutting it in, yeah, maybe put it in the main sequence. If you're doing a lot of cutting of the shots too. So here's that. Here's my camera, but you can see there's 0 action within it. Right? And that's because I've taken my car action and I think I have it in a separate shot. So let's go into the sequencer. I'm going to add another shot, car action. Double click on this. So the car action doesn't have a camera in it, right? It just has my car. So if I go back to I'm going to delete this shot and I'm actually going to add a different kind of track. It's called a subsequence track. A subsequence track is something that has action, but doesn't have a camera in it. So like my window moving is a subsequence track because it just has action, but no camera. So my shot track is controlling what I see. The subsequences controls action, let's say. So my car action is a subsequence track. And you can see that now when I do this, why is my car driving? If I double click on this, sports car point 2. Where's my car? Right spot. Oh, okay. You know what? This is not the right one that I wanted to add. So maybe I'll send you guys a tutorial on how I recorded the car separately because it's a little bit more esoteric. But I basically did my
Nice.
I have it.
Right.
So, what I had to do for the car to have all of its physics is kind of program it to drive down the driveway so that, you know, it's sort of reacting physically to the road. And then I used Unreal to do what's called a take recording. So like, if I want to play the game with as a character, I can use the take recorder to record my actions. So I can be an actor in that scene and like walk from point A to point B, or, you know, shoot a basketball or something like that, and use the take recorder, which is just recording the action of that character, and then take that recording and then put it in a sequence. And it's just going to remember the action that I took within that gameplay.
So it's just put it in a track. or anything.
It
Like,
does put it in.
oh, okay, so
Yeah.
it creates the track by
It
itself.
creates the track
Oh,
for
it's
itself.
also.
Yeah. So that's a little bit more specialized maybe. So like I'll send you the information on how to do that, but I don't think it's something that I'll cover in class. If you want to move a car, for instance, you could just use the rig rail for now. Okay. But I do have that right? Like this is a sub scene track. I have no camera within it. So I can go into my my parent track and then drag this sports car in, and I can play it wherever I want. I can now move the car in advance. Or move the car so it plays a little bit earlier. And then in my subsequences, I can add my character escaping. Right? So if I put the character escaping here, he's coming out too early. He's caught. He's busted. Right?
So sorry.
And so I can put them on two separate tracks so that I can time them appropriately, right?
You added, is it possible, and what would happen if you add a duplicate of that sequence?
I would just have two characters.
Would there be two? Okay, so it's
Oh my
like,
God,
it
can
would
you-
be
Well-
another instance.
You should.
So one thing to note is you can, two guys have a I thought about that, but I thought it was. So I could change any asset. So I might put a car in my scene, animate it, and create a level sequence. And that car always lives in the scene, on the level. If I go here and convert this by right clicking and convert this to spawnable, I'm taking that actor and making it just part of that sequence only. So that actor will disappear when that sequence is no longer. Right? So the advantage of that is I can replicate that, and it's going to spawn a new character every time I have that sequence. But if it's not spawned, it's not going to know how to handle that. So I have to make it spawnable, and then I could do it. Does that make sense?
So you have to make the sequence spawnable, or the character.
I have to make the
within
character
sequence.
within the sequence spawnable, so that now the sequence knows that I only want to spawn a character when I play it. So it's going to spawn a new character.
Right.
So then
If you don't make it spawnable, then it's like it's like you can't do that because this character can't exist in two places at once.
yeah, but it's referring to the same asset
Got it.
because it's in the level, right? So now if I add escape 2 again and just put it slowly behind, let's see what happens. Right, so the car drives. This character comes out. And then other character. Right. So now the level sequence is spawning another skeletal robot that performs those actions. So now I have 2 in my sequence. Right, so I see that there's 2 here. If I scrub past the second one, you see how that one disappeared? right? So there's one run scared, that's the skeletal asset. So if I scrub forward to the start of this one, now another one got spawned
Sure.
in my scene. Because now I'm in this subsequence. Okay. So then the other thing I'll add is my open window. Right. So I want the window to open before he gets out. So I can move the character. I think it can just happen right before. So I can then drag this. If you want to make the screenwriter, if you hit control and scroll, you can kind of change the timeline scale. You mean
Like vertically,
vertically? Oh,
like the things take up left.
I don't know about that. I think this is as thin as it gets, perhaps. There probably is a way. I don't know.
I ask a lot of Google.
Okay, everyone does, right? So I want the window to open, and then my character, right? You can see my window opened, and then once I got out of the sequence, it shut again, right? So what I probably just need to do is drag this out so it retains the state, so it stays open as long as I have.
That doesn't like slow it down. Because in my head, like if you expand it, it would slow down how quickly the window.
No, no.
Oh, okay. That's.
It would only do that if I drag the track.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sure, it makes sense that it would slow down because you're making the
In
sequence last a
Adobe,
longer.
in Adobe, that's all.
Yeah.
Well, if I drag this track, you can see my keyframes are moving now.
Right, and then makes it slow.
But all I'm doing here is just changing how long the sequence is at. Yeah.
Makes it so much easier.
I do think though that I could probably right click on this. Because with animations, you could have it hold the final position. Right, if you right click on. But I think with a subscene, it's not giving me that option. So I think the best bet is to just stretch this out for as long as you need the window to stay open.
But I'm having a bit of a hard time wrapping my head around where the like accents are after once you start animating them. So is that original window you had there now just like open in the model, like in an open place? Or is it?
Yeah.
Or is it only like, or is the sequence only like that?
So think of the sequence as, so in our Unreal Engine level, we have basically your X, Y, and Z, like static assets or objects, things located in space.
Yeah.
Think of sequencer as time, right? And so without a sequencer, time is just zero, right? Nothing is moving, nothing is happening, right? If we add a sequencer, we're just creating the potential for it. And so any object can be added to a sequencer and then controlled or manipulated for time. And if I ever move that timeline scrubber, right? If I ever move this thing around, right? All I'm doing is telling Unreal, show me the situation of the world at that time.
I see. Okay.
Right? And so if I have things that spawn as a result of sequencer, in that time, in that world or that level, it might have a spawn after.
Right.
But if I'm out of that time, then that actor will no longer be spawned, right?
I see, so the sequence is sort of like a layer on top of the level.
It's just, yeah, like a layer of time on top of it, right? So like, let's take a look here for a second. So like a funny thing happened, right? So like, remember I added the two, whoa, that's so fast. I added the two escape sequences, right? Oh, maybe it's gone now.
I don't really know. Should be, it's the well.
Oh, never mind. So there was a moment where my character, because I deleted the sequence while the character was alive or spawned, it was in my scene for a while.
Well,
Right?
So you
Because
just
it
see it
was,
standing.
it was just standing in
Like,
sequence. What do I do? I don't know. Sequencer was deleted. Right? And so, but now it's gone. So I don't know, like after I played it through a couple of times, I think it recognized like, oh, I don't belong there. I gotta get out, right? And so, you know, but to maybe your earlier question, I could position a camera here, for instance, and then record the action. Anywhere. Because the sequencer is only controlling the actors that are associated with it, right? So if I open this escape track, everything in here is what's in the sequence, right? I have a camera in here, but I could delete that. I'm only using it as a subscene, so it's not thinking about it.
So a sequence can be unrelated to the camera, it can be an actor
Yes.
performing,
Exactly.
then you attach it.
Yes.
yeah, it's completely decoupled, so you can view the same sequence
Yeah.
from multiple angles. I think that part I understand,
Yeah.
but it's sort of like you have to, like, when we have our basic level, we pretend like first we're blocking at the scene, it's just like a still. And then I place my character, I still have to physically place my character on the level where I want it to start the scene.
Yeah.
And then, so it's just gonna like T-pose there until like I apply the action I want it to do,
Yeah.
which is in this.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into maybe adding, let's add a character. Right? So I added some Mixamo characters, right? So let's just do this for a second. Let's go back to the basic layout here. Right. So remember, I'm still in this time, right? Just so you know, so I can see my character here falling, right? Just frozen. So let's say I want to animate another character doing something else, right? So I put all of my characters in the entourage folder, and the Y.bot is the male character, right? So the male character has a skeletal mesh, a physics asset, and a skeleton, right? So the skeletal mesh is what I want to use, right? So this is what I downloaded from Mixamo, right? So from Mixamo, right? I can select a variety of characters, right? Just use people, no monsters, please. Or cartoon characters for that.
Is that Jerry?
Who's Jerry? Oh,
Oh,
Tom and Jerry. Oh,
do for the map.
right. So I use the X-bot or the Y-bot for male or female, right? We can swap out the character later, right? But for now, we just need a stand-in, okay? Or you could use Lewis or Susie, right? I could also just silhouette them out if I want, right? But I don't think that's necessary. You just need the character, right? So with the character selected, I can just hit download, and I'm gonna get an FBX in a T-pose. I could download the Xbox as a skeletal mesh, right? And I have it, right? Now with this character selected, I can go in and find animations, right? So if I want my character to do capoeira, I could have him sort of perform these moves. And then I want this, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit download. And then I want to select without skin because I just downloaded the skeletal mesh, right? So when I do without skin, it's only going to bring in the animation asset for the skeleton associated with the character that I have on the screen, right? I could change my frame rate here to 24 to match my animation or my cinematic, but it doesn't really matter.
If you're changing in the film.
Well, the animation frame rates are just how the bones are positioned. The video is just going to capture where the position is,
Sure.
wherever it is.
certain
Yeah,
time.
it doesn't have to sync. It might be helpful if it does sync, but it doesn't have to sync. So I'm going to download that animation, right? So now I'm going to go in. Let's go to the downloads folder, right? I'm going to rename this just to not confuse it with what I have. I'm going to call him James. And Capoeira is just the animation, right? So now in my Unreal project, I'm going to go into my characters folder. I'm going to create a new folder now called James, because now I'm going to bring in a new character. Double click on that, and I'm going to add and import something to that folder, right? I could also just go to my downloads folder and just drag them in. For singular assets, I can do that, right? Make sure skeletal mesh is checked, right? Everything should be fine. Everything should be checked the way it needs to be when you bring it in.
Just imported the person.
I'm just importing the person. So it's going to give me some error messages. You could probably ignore it, but now I have all of the assets that are associated with James, right? Looks just like Ybot, but it's not. This is James. Okay. And so then I can go back to my downloads folder and I'm going to bring in that Capoeira animation and just drag it into James's folder. And here I want to make sure that the skeleton is set to James, right? I could set this to Ybot or any other mannequin. It's going to try to make that skeleton work with whatever skeletal mesh is there. You're going to have weird results unless you use it on the character that you got the animation for, right? So I just want to make sure that this is going to be associated with that character, which is James. And in fact, yeah, James. Okay.
If you wanted to use the same action on multiple characters, you would have to import it for each of them.
Yes, but if that character was taller or shorter, you're going to see some.
It would be messed up, but you could do it.
You
But
could
you
do
would have to do it. It's not like the action exists as like a block in your library.
Yeah.
You can just
If you
drag
brought in a different character and you wanted to use the same animation, you would have to do something called retarget,
Mhm.
which is taking the bones of the animation and retargeting their position to the new skeletal mesh,
Got it.
which is not super hard to do, but we'll avoid that.
We're in a note.
Okay. So here's James' skeleton. I'm going to import that. So now I have James doing capoeira. So if I double click on the skeletal mesh, I have my James skeleton. And then if I click on this little tab, I can see what all of the animations I have associated with James, in this case, just capoeira. Right?
Awesome.
So I'm going to close that out. I'm going to go to Ybot now. And I also want to just give him, because it's the same character, I'm just going to give the capoeira animation to the Ybot skill. And in fact, it knows that it found the closest skeletal mesh, I suppose. So import, right? But now if I open up Ybot, and go to the animations, my list is much bigger, right? Because I downloaded a bunch of animations too, right? So there's climbing down wall, there's getting up, there's looking around, There's running scared, right? Or just running, right? So these are animations that I looked up in Mixamo, just did some searching to see if the action that's in my mind of him climbing out the window, dropping to the ground and running away, right, would fit with any of these animations, right? And I'm just trying to chain them together to create, or try to create a seamless sequence, right? So then I can drag my Y-bot into this scene, right? So now you can see I have another Y-bot, right? This little lightning bolt means it's a spawnable character, and it's there and it's associated with a sequence, and it's just giving me that extra bit of information, right? So if I want to animate this robot, I guess it's not James, it's just this robot, right? I would maybe create a new level sequence. So go to my cinematics, right click, level sequence.
$100.
I'm gonna call it ls underscore ybot. I'll call it ybot dance because I want him to do the capoeira thing at the end, right? And so now if I double click on that, again, I want to change it to 24 frames per second so I could use it in my sequence if I wanted to, right? I want to add that actor into my sequencer. So I have James highlighted. So if I click add and go to actor to sequence, he's already up on top, or ybot, right? Or I can just type ybot here. I guess it's y underscore bot. And I could add the ybot, right? Not doing anything, right? I could key in transform and have to do, like, anybody watch, what's that at HBO show where they're at the end of the, they send clones to another planet, and then that golden character flies around in a T-pose, basically. That was actually. Oh, so you, what's it called? Raised by Wolves. Oh, anyway, sorry. That's fine. But now you can see when I bring in a skeletal mesh, an animation track just automatically comes in, right? So I can click on this, and whatever animations I have associated with this character will come across, right? So there are a couple of things I could do. One is I have a run in place animation, right? And so let's take a look here. Let's just do run, right? So here's a running animation, and you can see the character is kind of cycling through a run, right? If I click on this in place, he's just running through the cycle without actually moving in place, right? So there are two ways of importing an animation like this. Any kind of walking or running or movement animation. You could either have it in place, which just does the cycle while the character is not actually moving, or you could have, it's technically not root motion, but the animation includes within it a certain amount of translation components, right?
Then you, if it's in place, you would put it on a truck.
Exactly. So if, or just move the transform, right? So now so the other thing I'll do is with my run in place animation, I could stretch this out, and it's just gonna play that cycle as long as it's there. So it's just looping that cycle for as long as I want, right? But you can see that that character is not moving, right? So then I do have to move the transform. Right, so let's go back to 0. I'm gonna open this up, and it's location on the X needs to change, right? I have this key highlighted, so it's set to auto key, which means if I move the character, it's going to create a key wherever whenever I unclick the mouse, basically, right? So now if I go back, I have a start and end position keyed. So if I hit play, right? And you can see it kind of ramps up and slows down. So what I might do is right click on this and make them linear keys to get rid of that ramping up and slowing down. So now it won't accelerate and decelerate, it'll just perform. But you kind of have to eyeball because the feet are like sliding differently to the actual action. So you have to sort of play with that and figure out how to make that.
Is there a way to change the, after you download them, like the rate that a thing plays at, the rate that animation plays?
You would have to download a new animation at a
Download.
different.
Cause you can change it in Mixamo.
You could change it in Mixamo, yeah.
Okay.
So not every animation, but here you have speed. Right, so here's Usain Bolt maybe,
Oh, right.
or overdrive. Right, oh yeah, look at moving really fast.
Change the like if you were to do the one with displacement, you could change how far it went to here.
It's only what's captured in. So if I did the overdrive, it'll just move a shorter distance
Oh, I see.
for the, is that how that would work? Or it'll be less time, same distance.
Right.
Because it's moving faster. Right. So this is one way of doing like a run animation, right?
Why is it-
That's just the way the animation was looking. He's kind of
Like
running,
inside,
he's running sideways.
that's just a.
He's kind of doing like a side, what do you call it? There's like an exercise move in your.
Oh, that's how the run.
It's just the
That
animation.
particular, that particular.
Oh, I thought it looked like it was going
No,
straight.
that was a
isn't-
different.
Oh, that was a different one. Okay, got it.
So let's stop at this point. And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna stop my animation at this point. So now it goes back to T-pose.
And there's no like gradual, like the body doesn't just like gradually go into T-pose, it just like.
Well, you can have it blend.
Oh, you
So
can't
that's,
blend?
yeah.
Oh.
So now I wanna do a different animation.
Slow down. Stop.
So let's take a look at an animation,
That's- yeah, it's-
right? Here, let's not do that. Let's go back.
There's not all my T-pose.
So I'm gonna add,
Yeah. Get it, yeah.
so let's add the scared running loop, right? Except this time the character actually moves in there, right? And so the question was, how do I, so all of a sudden you can see how the character goes from one position and jumps into the next position, right? So if you just push this into,
Well, it just does.
it just does it automatically, right? You just push it into it
Overlap. This
and then it'll do a slow transition,
engine.
right? So it's pretty easy, right? But now I have a character that's moving on its own without moving the transform, right? So if I stretch this out, what's gonna happen is it's gonna pop back to where you originally started, right? So I don't want that. So I can copy this,
Yeah.
Control C and Control V, and just snap it. So this is where the 24 frames per second animation might have been helpful, right? Because it wants to snap to my frame rate point, right? But if I uncheck this magnet, I can move my animation freely without it snapping to the frame, right? So I just want to align this. I could even have it overlap ever so slightly, right? But what still happens is I pop back, right? But with any animation, I can have it remember a bone from the previous animation, right? So at the end of my sequence, or at the start of my sequence, I'm on, say the character is on its left foot, right? So I can right click here and I could say match this bone in previous clip, right? So I'm gonna find the left foot bone. So where is the left foot? Left foot, right? So now if I scroll, he's just gonna continue running.
But then the origin point is on,
The origin is not moving.
so if you wanna add like, let's say he just stops randomly
Yeah.
or turn.
So
then
if
you
I
still
want him-
do match.
So
and
if I
then
do
like-
this, he's gonna pop back,
Right,
right? But if I want him to stay at the end, so I can right click on this, go to properties. Where is it? when finished, I could just say keep state.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
And so then when it ends, it'll just stay at the last.
Oh,
positions.
it
It
will
won't
just
snap.
stay in the last frame
Yeah.
of the animation.
Yeah. So if I wanna, so the nice thing about this is the movement is now perfect. I don't have to use a transform track because he's perfectly there, right? He's like right where I want him to be, right? So now at the end of this track, maybe even a little bit sooner, but that's just, let's say I want him to run a little bit and then just go into a capoeira, right? So let's add the capoeira track and then, but he pops back, right?
Yeah, back.
So he's on his right foot, capoeira starts on the right foot, so maybe I'll want to match the right foot in this clip. So let's go to right foot. Right, so now he stops and then maybe I want to blend it a little bit more, so I just push it in.
But on the base level, this character, like James, always exists at the place where you first placed him in a T pose.
Yeah, so if I'm out of this, if I'm out of the sequence, he's there. This is
and
where I placed.
if, let's say you want him to run longer and keep the same thing of like left foot, if you copy that second run,
Mhm.
does it keep?
I think
all
it
the
does.
properties?
Yeah, so let's try that. I think it does.
Okay.
So let's copy this. Oops.
Yeah.
So let's move our timeline here. Control C, Control V. Yeah,
Yeah,
it does,
yeah.
remember. So you're copying the bone association as well.
Right, because it's just gonna generate the vector based off of your class. It's always gonna.
If I copy this one though,
It's gonna go back to
Yeah.
the beginning.
If you copy which one?
The first one,
Yeah.
because we didn't set the left foot bone, whatever thing.
right? So this is basically what I did with that other animation. So if we go and open the escape sequence,
All just to get names to come out. Well, just for James and now get caught.
right? So now if we go over here, right? So I have a climbing animation where he climbs up onto this thing. And then I have a climbing down a wall animation. And then a falling animation is just this, and I'm transforming him down,
Wow.
right?
And you just like blended shit together.
Yeah, and then these are all blend. You can see like that little, that's all blended, right?
Is there a landing action or does he?
So,
like, how does
so he falls, right? And I have a different James for that.
Of the master.
So now I have a different X spot that spawns.
That's why you hit him behind the bush. Because you couldn't find the.
I could have probably blended a few different animations,
Oh, wow.
but yeah, like it was hidden behind something.
Yeah.
I see, yeah, so
Take
in
advantage of
in the base level, it's like the starting scene is you have the one guy in the window. You have this person like on the ground in the landing position.
Well,
and then
he's not even there. He's not even there until, yeah, he spawns when.
spawns, okay.
Yeah, it's not his cue to be on stage yet. So when it's time, he's like, I'm ready. And then he gets up.
But he
Right?
doesn't exist like as an element within the base level.
Yeah, it's like, this is my stunt double and this is my actor,
Sure.
right? It happens in film all the time, right? And then same thing, I did the root motion.
Yeah.
Where he's like trotting along, right? I found a jumping animation to jump over the corner. And then he looks back, right? Run, look back. And then it's just the chaining of the running scared animations going all the way, right? Okay. But all of this is in a track, right? It does have a camera in case I want to see while I'm doing this, what it's going to look like in frame. But I'm really just using this as a subsequence because I don't need the camera itself, right? So if I go back now and let's do my 2-pane layout again.
That's it. Yeah, I know. Even when I was on the side, it would still keep it as a camera.
Right. And so my escape action is all here. Right? If I double click on this, I do have the camera, but because I put it in a subscene track, it's ignoring the camera. And I'm only just using the action. Right? So now if I wanted to, I could add another subscene and do my Y-bot things. All right, it's not in this, Right, so now in my Y-bot dance, I can just right click on this and make this a possessable or a spawnable. Right, because I don't want to accidentally see this character standing there in another shot. Right, and so if I make it spawnable, as long as that action isn't taking place, that character is.
And wait, so that only shows on the items when you're hovered over.
Yeah, when the sequence is active.
Okay.
Okay, so this is how I would structure your cinematic. Right, so within your main sequence, you have a series of shots, right? So like, let's say I want to shorten this shot and then add another shot track. Here's my garden shot, right? See that I want to pop that right here, right? Right, so here I can just hit play and I'll be cutting to all of the sequences that I have active as shot tracks. And I can play my action using subsequence tracks down below. Okay. And when you're done with your initial cut, right? We're gonna use something called movie render queue to render it out. Okay. So if you go to edit, plugins, and type movie render queue. Let's just type movie. There it is. Movie space, right? Movie render queue. Make sure this is active. Right? You could check this too. We're not going to do additional passes, but you could check both, but we really just need the movie render. What the movie render queue allows us to do is override some basic performance optimizations on Unreal, right? So Unreal is designed for video games. It's designed for real time so that what we see is what we play when we're in the scene, right? If we want to pump up certain things like global illumination and reflections and things like that, it's hard to do that real time because the graphics card just doesn't have the ability to keep up with at least like 30 to 60 frames per second that gamers are usually playing their game, right? That would require a lot of optimization to occur before doing that. We're not doing any optimization, right? And so what we can do though is we could still take advantage of all of the kind of nice rendering capabilities of Unreal by rendering it not in real time, but slowly through this process called movie render queue, right? So if I now click on this little 3-dot drop down, right? What I asked you to do was use the movie scene capture, right? And take out an AVI, right? And that's not the best quality, right? So we want to use movie render queue. And then if we click on the clacker, we get this configuration, right? And so what this is going to render is whatever the active sequence is here, right? So I'm going to click on this configuration, right? We can take out JPEGs or PNGs, right? I'm gonna delete this one.
As in like the map you imported of the Google Maps? Is that
Yeah,
what,
yeah, well, PNG is a file type,
but like,
and
why are you removing? Like, are there objects in the world that are JPEGs and PNGs or?
no, this is just the image that's gonna come. So this is exporting frames.
Right,
It's not exporting a video. Right? So, and then each frame could be a JPEG. Let's just leave it at JPEG. JPEG is fine. JPEG or PNG, they're just image file types, right? EXR is lossless. And it's gonna have a lot more information and take longer to render. But if you wanted to do things like color grading afterwards, you would take out an EXR because the images will have a lot more information. But for our purposes, you can just keep it at JPEG, right? We want to add anti-aliasing. And we want to add game overrides. And these two are the only things that we would ever add. So if we go to anti-aliasing, we want to check the box to override anti-aliasing. We don't want to use anti-aliasing, and we're just going to check this to none. Right? And we want the renderer to take extra passes to cover our to just generate a nicer image, right? And so there are two sample count options. One is called spatial sample count. One is called temporal sample counts. If you have a lot of movement in your scene, you're going to want to use temporal sample counts because it's going to make the motion blur look a lot nicer. If it's just a lot of static objects, you can just keep it at spatial, right? And so because I do have some moving objects, I'm just going to set this to 9, right?
even if it's just a camera moving, is that considered?
Same thing. If the camera moves, things move relative to that. So it does count that the camera is moving. Right? So I'm going to set that to 9. If I have particles in place, I might want to render more warm-up frames. Because what warm-up frames does is it hits the play button for you. So then your particles spawn and start doing its thing. And then when it starts recording or when it starts rendering, your particles had a chance to sort of populate the world. Otherwise, if you don't have any warm-up frames, it's going to start when you render and you won't see any of the particles until they finally appear, right? It does do warm-up frames automatically, but if you need more warm-up frames, you could check this box. And I think you could change the number of warm-up frames, right? But for now, we could uncheck that because we're not doing particles for this exercise, for this purpose. We'll add particles as part of our finishing or our finishes. And then we want to look at our output. And we could change our resolution. You could do 4K if you want to down the line. But for now, 1920 by 1080. That's just HD resolution. If you had audio, it will export an audio file as well, I believe. But this is giving us our file output and our file name format. So it's going to take your sequence name, right? So in this case, it's going to be ls parent. And then it's going to just give us our frame number, right? And we could hit escape or accept rather. And I could save this configuration and give it a name so I can just recall that later, right? So I'm going to put it in my cinematics folder and I can just call it save, right? And so then I click render local. It's going to start running through its sample. So it renders relatively quickly, but it's not real time. And once it's finished with its initial warm-up frames, we'll see a preview of what it's rendering out.
You don't have to show us. I'm sure to figure out, but the audio you put in that same thing where we added all the sequences.
Yeah. Yeah, well, what you would do is you would put audio actors in the scene
Okay,
and you could have sequencer trigger it on and off.
okay.
So you can play certain sounds. I'll cover that next week
No, that's, yeah, I'm wondering.
or the week after.
I'm just wondering, does, it would be like a physical actor in the work?
Yes, it would be.
That distance,
So, yeah, of course. So the closer you are, the louder it is, yeah. Let's see if it gets to the actual frames, you can see what it looks like. Hopefully it doesn't crash. So this is how I want you guys to render out your cinematics. Using movie render key. With just the exact settings that I set. Okay.
Oh, and then the other one.
And then we'll like pump up values and things like that later on. Right, but that's basically what I did to render this out. Is just, you could see it gives you like these weird info bars. We can get rid of that later. Or you can edit that out in After Effects. But, and then the audio here was added in After Effects, right? Let me see if I can open. So let's go to our project folder. Right, so C drive, then 19C 2025, Unreal Engine project. So here's my Villasava folder. If you go in saved, if you go to movie renders, this is where it's saving to. So if I double click on that, you can see I've got a lot of different sequences. So it's a little bit messy. You may want to create new folders every time you generate a new rendering, right? Because it's a bunch of image files, right? So I'm going to scroll down here, right? You can see I did some that are in black and white, and I just added a little number designation to separate the different versions, right? The way you would edit this at this point is you would need to bring it into After Effects. Oh, there's no After Effects on this?
Yeah,
Really?
we have Premiere.
Only Premiere? It's not even,
Oh, we do. There-
I don't really know how to use Premiere.
Yeah.
But we can try it.
Way easier than the Unreal Engine.
Yeah. So let's try Premiere. I bet you I could install After Effects. Is there a Creative Cloud? Yeah, there is. Ugh. Except me. Instead. Oh.
For people. Vote on Mondays for every 2 distance.
Oh, sorry. How many is there?
I don't know how they determined. How they, yeah, I don't know how they. That's decided who got that power.
I give up.
But
Oh my God.
turn.
These are from similar movie tickets stuff. I don't know, it's just. Like, who did all the orders?
It's just
Who did all the orders?
eclectic.
Right.
Weird thing. Yeah,
It's also true though.
of course, you get that.
Everything's the
Probably sounds.
That sucks, but it's a big screen.
Remember, it's all you really need. Just drink like a pool. He's like. At least you pay attention to.
Sign out of another device.
Third ball movies, super, so I can focus, like, if you can.
But you'd be happy. So you're.
Or maybe I go.
But like.
Do you guys have access to Premiere on your machines now? Okay, let's try it this way. So I don't know if I'm gonna have time to install or get Premiere to work. But what you're gonna eventually have to do is highlight the frames that you rendered out. Right, so here, this is LS Master 8. And so I'm just gonna go all the way to where that ends. Right, this one's a very short sequence. Right, so here, right? And I want to import this as a sequence, an image sequence or a JPEG sequence. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a single file in Premiere or After Effects as a video asset using the JPEGs as the individual frames.
It's pretty good, I've done, it's pretty simple, like it's, the tutorials are pretty good online for that.
Okay, okay,
I've seen like a.
okay. But
Not very literate,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, but long story short, it's rendering out frames. And so basically, the other thing to kind of bear in mind is this is your rendering, right? So if you wanted to just render single frames, you can create a 2-frame sequence and render out specific camera views and just, ramp up the qualities. There you could do 8K if you wanted to, because you're just doing 1 or 2 frames. And then use that for your 2D renderings, right? So each frame is essentially an individual rendering, right? And then you could pump up the values of the light bounces and all of that stuff when you do movie render queue. Okay, so then the next step is to take the rendered frames, put it into After Effects. If you want to take a stab at sound, you can do it, but we'll cover sound next time. I wanted to do it today, but always run out of time. But audio is, it's an art and a class in and of itself, but we just want to not have total silence at the end of the, for our final animation or our cinematic, right? Adding audio, even if it's just ambient audio, right? You just kind of want sound to not take us out of the space. If it's just total silence, it's deafening, right? It's very noticeable. So make sure you're not thinking about audio, right? Especially for you falling water students, right? We should hear a lot of water in the background, right? birds at the very minimum you could throw in there pretty easily. And you could find a ton of sounds. I use free sound. He's still running. He's been running this whole time. freesound.org. Just create a, let's see if I can watch.
Yeah, we should.
Right. These are all kind of free WAV files that you could download. In Unreal, you can only use WAV files. In After Effects, I think you can use MP3s, probably in Premiere as well. But the sounds that I used for, right? You guys can hear the sound here. These are just sounds that I downloaded from online. It's not. Huh?
Did he hum?
No,
Oh, I heard.
you heard a hum. That was just you're projecting yourself. You're projecting yourself into the scene.
So the sounds not in Unreal Engine.
This sound was in After Effects, but I'll show you how to do sounds in Unreal.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I want the car to sort of
Yeah,
get softer
so
as it
good
goes
point.
away, right? So yeah, we'll do sound in Unreal. Okay, any questions? Any questions about next week? Right? You guys are doing all the talking next week,
Yes.
right? You're gonna tell us what your videos are. We're gonna be harsh critics, right? Right? This is like Cisco. You guys remember Siskel and Ebert? Comes up, comes down.
That was Julius.
Right? Focus on structure, right? Composition, less on the details or the beauty, quote unquote, beauty of the scene, right? What we should really see is like the potential for like all these opportunities to like express an idea. And the more you could tie it into the architectural project that you're dealing with, the better, right? I didn't really do that. I think in a different version, maybe I would have done like, I don't know, something that was more of a celebration of core, but I didn't feel like celebrating core. So he's been celebrated and
Exactly. There's my cigarettes.
I was thinking about that too.
He would.
Yeah.
But. But.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's like a homage to.
so we covered using Rhino and Datasmith, right? So if you have assets that you want to bring over, you could use Datasmith. We talked about setting up the sequencer using shot tracks with cameras and subscenes for action, right? We talked about movie render queue, composing your shots in a master sequence and then rendering that out through movie render queue. We talked about animations, right? Just because you can animate monsters in your scene doesn't mean you should animate monsters in your scene, right? I'll just throw that as a caveat. I did want to cover some weather, but I do want to add weather to my scene just so you know how to do it. But I'll do that. That'll be part of the icing stage, right? Like icing on the cake stage. And also some of the materials. We'll talk about like dealing with materials. We did a little bit of materials with the landscape material, but we could do something similar with textures for surfaces where we can try to blend between two different materials and try to take advantage of the tessellation. But this is really only going to work for rendering out cinematics. You could maybe get away with it for gameplay and maybe for VR, but VR might be a little bit tricky to do tessellation on. But you'll at least know how to do it. And then a lot of you do have water in your scene, so I'll encourage you to look up some water. Like there's a pretty robust water system in Unreal, which I haven't covered yet. But you could look it up and just kind of add a water surface if you want to. But if you're not ready for that, just put a plane, right? If you falling water, if you have a waterfall, just put a plane that says waterfall, or that'll just make it blue and we'll know it's a waterfall, right? But if you want that as part of the scene, like as a protagonist in the cinematic that you're creating, that is something that I would recommend you explore relatively quickly. What else? Some of you aren't keeping up with your homework assignments. That's not to say that I don't think you're working on stuff, but the homework is all I have to know. It's evidence I could use against you. Okay, if you're doing the work, we don't have a problem. But if you're not doing the work and you're not doing homework, guess what? I have evidence to prove that you're not engaged. I don't want to use it. I've never failed a student in this class, except there might have been one person I really wish I did, but I didn't. Because he did produce something at the end. She might have been, it was okay, whatever, just. I don't think, it's not gonna happen, right? You guys are all gonna pass, right? But if you don't do your homework and you don't put in a modicum of effort, it's gonna be hard for me not to have a conversation with you that I don't wanna have, right? So try to keep up with the homework, just let me know that you're engaged, or just send me an email, say, hey, I haven't been keeping up with the homework, but I'm working on my project. Because I don't want you to waste time catching up on homework if you could be working on your project. Okay, that's not to say don't do your homework, but kind of. You can do, from here on out, there isn't really that much homework, it's just working on projects. Okay, if there's anything you need to go back to, you have all of those resources. If you want to revisit any tutorials, please do so. But like I said, a lot of this is going to be like looking for things online and implementing them in your scene. So if there are specific things that you are looking for and you're having a hard time finding, just shoot me an email. And I'm pretty good at YouTube and Google searches these days related to Unreal Engine, so I could definitely help you out there. Okay. Okay, project selections, please. Architecture of historic significance. If you want to make an argument for your projects, sure, we can talk about it. But let's avoid making video games and make it more artists. Yes. Okay. All right, cool. Thank you.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So for the architecture, does it have to be like the really famous architecture piece or?
Well, what project do you want to do?
I'm not sure because at first like the piece you want to submit, you said it was like architecture related, but right now we changed it to like